Hey everyone, Elias here with We Aim for Self-Defense. Today's video is going to be, I think, a relatively short one, but it's in direct answer to a question we got from one of our wonderful patrons. And if you want to check out the site, it's patreon.com/self-defense training, relatively easy to remember. Supporting the project there will help us do more regular podcast, and we have 2 new episodes recorded. We'll be able to get more gear. I'll be able to get some soundproofing so that the cats don't interfere. No, we'll probably won't ever be able to do that. Cats and dogs are part of this. But support the project if you can when you're a patron. You get early access to a lot of our content. Some content will be exclusively for you for a very long time. Although we, over time, hope to open up most things eventually to all people because we do want to share. But being a patron gives you early access. It gets you prioritized on these messages too. For example, I got this message, question from our patron, and I answered him within an hour, and next day we're making a video about it. So you can also help drive the content. So again, go support the project if you're able. We have a lot of different levels. And if you're not able, just sharing videos and telling others about this and watching the videos go a long way as well. As patreon.com/self-defense training. So the message we got was from Trip. It says, "Hey there, I'm digging the content you're putting out there. Super informative. Thank you. One thing that has always mystified me as a non-gun owner is the difference in ammunition specifications. For instance, I'll hear people talking about federal ammunition or X number grain or jacketed ammunition, and I really don't know what all that means. Is there an ammo 101 you might be able to offer noobs like me? Thanks." Thanks for the question, Trip. I'm going to do my best now to do that. So I am also a beginner here, right? So I found myself searching these same things as I'm working on my own training, as I'm figuring out what to buy for my firearms, what firearms to buy, and what the difference between these different terms are. A lot of times you'll get some fast talking on gun channels that are really meant for really experienced folks, or at least folks that want to pretend they are, and you'll have really experienced speakers or presenters. All that is to say that I've been looking into these types of terms out of necessity as a newer gun owner, and so it's very pertinent. I find myself asking these same questions when I was going to the range, going to stores, taking classes, and just researching as well. So this is truly going to be a 101 video. We're going to try to go over and these terms you're asking about, our patron Trip was asking about, and not go into so much the debates about, especially when we get into like caliber or brands or grain, about which type is better versus another for different scenarios. Those are interesting conversations to have, and we'll have some of those when we have like experts that I think whose experience and perspective is a little more useful than mine. And actually, the second of the recent 2 podcasts we just recorded, myself and Alana McLaughlin, the second one is a shorter one, and it kind of nerds out about different pistols. I was at a recent range day, which I'll be writing about and presenting some video on. Tried 8 different pistols, and went to Alana and afterwards, and we talked about a lot of the different specifications of these guns and her experiences with it. So we will get into the weeds on things like that. But for now, we're really going to try to make this a 101 per the request of our patrons. So Drip asks again, here people talking about federal ammunition or an X number of grain or jacketed ammunition versus like hollow point. Wants to know the difference of that. And that's true. That can be really confusing. Someone's talking about ammunition, and then they'll throw around a bunch of terms, right? So let's talk about, let's talk about the first, brands, okay? Some of what you'll hear when people are discussing an ammunition that they're using or bought or want to get or anything like that is something like, you'll hear them say Federal ammunition. Now, in that instance, Federal is a brand. Federal is a company that makes ammunition. So someone might mention that because they like Federal, or they tried Federal but then they tried another one and they like one over the other. So they're just specifying to you which brand they like, because firearms are kind of picky sometimes with what ammunition they'll take in terms of brands. Sometimes some brands will work better in your firearm than a different brand. There's different reasons for it that I myself am trying to like flesh out and learn about, but for starters, just know that. So when someone mentions something like Federal, which is a brand, they're just saying, I use this brand. And you can ask them why they why they use that brand, why they found that to be their choice. Maybe it's just the cost. Maybe it works better than other ones they've tried. But when you hear things like Federal, or, I mean, let's see, right here, I've got Browning Ammunition. That's the brand name, like Federal. Here I've got some Armscor, which I can't get to work for my pistol. So I checked that off and said, these 38 specials from Armscor do not fit into my my revolver for whatever reason. I'm trying to figure that out, right? But those are brands, okay? So when you hear certain words, they might just be a brand. So check that, all right? Next thing I'm gonna get into here is caliber, right? So like Trip asked, he's like, I might hear different grains of jacket ammunition versus hollow point. But sometimes what you hear is caliber as well. You might hear someone say, I got Federal 9mm. They'll put the millimeters after it sometimes will indicate that we're talking about caliber. Sometimes they won't say millimeter when they're talking about it. They might say, I have a 22 LR. They might say, I have a 38 special, or I have 380. So it's not always indicated. But caliber is a big designator that you're going to hear anytime someone's talking about ammunition. They're going to have some numbers, and sometimes the numbers have to do with caliber, okay? So this is a 22 long rifle round of ammunition, right? This can go into, as the name kind of clues us in, to different types of rifles, also into different types of handguns. This round is 9mm. It's a 9mm round. So you'll see the lengths are a little different. The widths are far, far, far different. Okay, those are the diameters and the circumferences. Okay. Keep it with the 22 in comparison. We've got on my left, 22 long rifle. On my right, 38 special round. Here's this 9mm again. Here's a 38 special. They're different sizes. The caliber, you might hear someone mention a name. You can ask, is it the caliber? Or they might say it's 9mm. It's chambered in 9mm. A gun is chambered in 9mm. That means it's going to take 9mm ammunition. You can say this pistol is chambered in 38 special, right? Which means it's going to take that size. They might say this is chambered for 22 long rifle. Or 22 LR, it means that, right? Or they might say, I got some 22s, or I got a 38 special, a box 38 special, a box of 9s or 9mm. There's longer names for these, but that's how you usually hear that. So the caliber has to do, broadly speaking, with the size of the ammunition, okay? Now, we'll also get into grain, and I mentioned this in a recent video, I believe. I was talking about actually this ammunition I've been having some real issues with. I mentioned the caliber, it's 9mm. I mentioned the brand, which is Winchester, because I want to let you know I'm having trouble with this brand, and it happens to be this caliber because that's what this pistol called for, and this grain, because sometimes the brands matter a lot in terms of, like I said, if we're working your pistol. But just to be sure, I want people to know, like, the grain is this, and this brand, and this type of round, so that they know, and they could try it out, they could share their experiences, or they can, maybe decide to be careful around that as well. So grain, when you see a number and you see grain, that has to do with weight. It's a unit of measurement for mass. basically, right? So when you see the numbers with grain, it just has to do with how heavy the part of the ammunition that is going to be the projectile, because part of this is a shell that gets ejected from your firearm, well, for the most part, ejected from most firearms, and then the projectile is what advances into our target. And it's that projectile that advances towards the target and into the target that number with grain is actually telling us the mass of, right? So a higher number will be a higher mass. And again, I'm not going to get into the debates of like, well, which one should I use? Is heavier grain ammunition better than a lighter one? That's a complicated question that there's a lot of subjective opinions, and as often is the case with firearms and ammunition, it's conditional, right? You could have a potentially devastating round like a 5.56, or excuse me, a NATO 5.56, and that is relatively light and relatively slim. It does a lot of damage. You put those in AR-15 rifles, do a lot of damage. It's not necessarily like heavier is better than lighter, or lighter is better. It's really circumstantial, and it's a matter of subjective opinion, and people with different experiences or using ammunition for different reasons will have different opinions. But it's a 101. The grains, the number plus grain, that's having to do with the weight, okay? Great question there, Trip, about that. That doesn't sound like normal units of measurement outside of firearms that we use, like ounces or pounds or meters or yards or, grams or things like that, right? I guess it does sound a little bit like grams, but grains is different, right? Also, Trip asks, I hear about jacketed ammunition. That is in contrast to hollow point. So I'm not going to talk in a super technical, like manufacturing way about this, but I'm going to show you some differences and talk about the different uses or potential uses, right? So here I have a piece of ammunition, round of ammunition that's chambered. It is a 38 special, so that's the size, right? It happens to be, I'm seeing on the box, and they'll tell you on the box off the bat, it's 158 grains. Right, so it's a 38 special round, weighing in at 158 grains, and it is, and we'll say this on the box as well, it's full metal jacket. Okay, it's important to know what these terms mean, because when we're out there purchasing, if we don't know what these terms mean, we may not know what we want to use them for. Whether we want to use them for practice, target practice, or whether we want to use them for self-defense situations. We'll talk about why, right? So this is 38 special round. It's 158 grains, and it is full metal jacket. It's a jacketed round, okay? All around it's kind of smooth. You can see there's a covered point there. This is another round of different brand, slightly different weight, but it is 38 special. So theoretically, these will both go into guns that call for 38 specials. Right? Now, this, as opposed to being a full metal jacket round, fully jacketed round, is a hollow point. Okay, let's look at the difference here. Let's see if we can get this in here. Even for the non-technical eye like mine, you can see differences between the points, right? This one comes up, reaches a flat surface, some will be more rounded. And this one comes up and it has a point that is hollowed out. Now there is some red stuff in here. That's basically so that it helps it not get caught up in cloth, or, I know that's kind of dark to think about, that little red point in there, but sometimes you'll see ones without that, and it's hollowed out. You can see this hopefully a little better there, okay? Now, sometimes you'll see a box of ammunition at the store or online, and it will say, this is target ammunition or practice rounds. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess that's for when I practice at the range. That's good. What they're talking about there are is saying this is a full metal jacket round. Sometimes it won't say target and you won't know, and you'll have to know what full metal jacket means. All right. So both of these rounds are very capable of having basically lethal effects. Okay. I'm going to show in a different caliber. These are 9mm rounds of ammunition. On my left is a full metal jacket round. It's rounded up. On my right is a hollow point. So you see that tip up there is hollowed out, right? Why do I have both? Why might I prefer one over another in different situations? Well, they're both capable of again, doing lethal damage. Hollow points are and have been and are still used by militaries, so they kill people, right? That's not an issue. It's not that because this is a practice round that it's not capable of hurting. You got to be very careful with these. They absolutely can kill. Hollow points were created to kill as well, but in a little bit of a different way. And it's one end of it is a little bit dark and grisly and sounds bad. And in fact, I believe under international law, hollow points, like many other things used in America, are probably, I think they're illegal under international law, and it's because they're considered cruel. So the reason is these hollow points are meant to certainly penetrate a target, but not penetrate as deep as a jacketed round, a full metal jacket round of ammunition, but they are meant to expand, right? They're meant to deform. And that expansion inside the body, if you place it well, I guess, is to ideally, if you're defending yourself, will hit vital areas, vital organs, expand in the body and do more damage, right? To create a bigger hole inside the body, which will create more internal bleeding and, have more likelihood of being fatal, is the idea. Hollow points are meant to expand / deform inside the body. They will not penetrate as deep, theoretically, as a full metal jacket round of ammunition. And again, there's some grisly components to that. Again, we're talking about in the instance and the hypotheticals always here on this channel of us defending ourselves or defending those who need us to do so. So we're not being aggressors, but this is meant to go inside the body and expand. These are more expensive than the full metal jacket ones. So you usually don't practice with these in the range. Although, as we said in a different video, you absolutely should. If you're carrying or you have in your pistol for self-defense purposes or any type of firearm, certain ammunition, like a hollow point, you want to at least know that it works. So you should go out and spend a little money and test it out on the range to make sure it works well. Because sometimes it will not. You'll need to get a different brand, or you'll need to make some adjustments to your firearm. So you do want to do that. But by and large, we go and practice with the more inexpensive jacketed rounds because they are cheaper and because it's in a controlled environment where we know the backstop of our targets. We're not firing at people or firing at inanimate objects, following all the rules of safety, all the range rules. Why is that important? Well, although a jacketed round will not do that grisly work of expansion inside and make a bigger hole inside the body, it does have a really straight path, and it does penetrate more deeply, I'm speaking in broad terms here, generalized terms, than the hollow point. So there's a greater risk of what they call over-penetration. There's a greater risk that you can hit your intended target in a self-defense situation of someone attacking you, or someone who needs protection, and you hit your target and it goes through them and hits something else. You don't want to think about what other things you could hit, but we have to think about that, right? So although on the one hand, we're the conventional wisdom nowadays is to carry hollow points in as defense ammunition, meaning not when you're at the range, but in the situations where, like, I have this firearm at the ready to protect myself, protect others. You want a hollow point because it has the potential to make a bigger hole in an attacker and possibly be more lethal. It's also good because these don't typically over penetrate and go through an intended target and into someone else or something else that we don't want it to go to. It's a lot of firepower. These are little explosions, and something can not just go past an attacker into another person behind them or a pet. It can go through your walls. It can go into another house and hit a neighbor potentially, depending on a lot of different circumstances. I don't mean to scare you, but I mean to scare you a little bit, and that's the reason why people, normal civilians in a self-defense situation, often who are wary of over-penetration and the unlikely scenario that they have to use their ammunition, their firearms as in self-defense or in defense of those who need it, they're worried about it going, even if they have the correct aim, going through the intended target and hit something else or someone else, going down the block or something like that. We don't want that. So they get these hollow points, which do not penetrate as deep, even into the body, but they still have, as well, a lot of lethal capability because they expand, ideally, and do a lot of damage, right? So I hope that helps illuminate a tiny bit about the difference between full metal jackets, which you'll see uses an acronym, oftentimes FMJ, or hollow points. You also hear things referred to, like we said, the shorthand might be like, for full metal jackets might be, this is a range target, or if you ask for practice or target ammunition, they'll send you to boxes of full metal jacket ammunition. You'll also see people refer to hollow points as defense rounds. So those are some interchangeable, synonymous types of phrases there, okay? Those are pretty much the questions that Tripp was asking. We talked about some of the words we're going to hear about are like Browning or Armscor, which I have here, or Federal, which I have some here. Those are just going to be the brand, right? When you hear a number with grain, that's going to be the weight, the mass of the piece of ammunition that is the projectile that goes towards the target. When you hear full metal jacket, that's a fully jacketed, a fully covered round of ammunition that certainly has lethal capability and is used by military. So you got to be just as careful. It's not a toy round, but it penetrates really, really deep, and it does not expand as much. Whereas the hollow points or the defense rounds, they are meant to not penetrate as deep, which is good because there's less risk of over-penetration through an intended target and into something innocent or something that we don't want to hit. But they make bigger holes in attackers. So it's a little bit of some terminology that I hope is helpful for you all as you search and as you shop and ask questions. Please continue sending in those questions. If you send in questions to us, you can help drive the content. If you're watching this and you're not a patron, but you want to support the project, make sure you visit patreon.com/self-defense training and share this even if you don't have the resources to support us financially, and send us questions as well, even if you're not a patron, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thanks so much.